Hey everyone, it's Ben, your favorite science teacher. I've been invited to your financial literacy class to talk about my experience with purchasing a home. This year, I became the proud owner of a co op apartment in the Bronx, and your teachers wanted to have me talk about my experience with the purchase of an apartment and what it went into it, and have prepared several questions that we'll answer and be able to share out my experience as part of your next assignment. So, the first question: how long was the process from starting to look for your apartment to finding the one you wanted? So, when I decided to look for an apartment, I had a goal that by the time I turned 40, I wanted to have my own space. I wanted to purchase my apartment by the time I turned 40. It just so happened because of COVID, there was an opportunity to prepare for this process by the end of the year. I could actually have pulled out of my reserves and be able to start looking for an apartment. And so I began the process in January just to start to get my feet wet and to figure out what exactly I was looking for. And I knew that I was looking for a two-bedroom apartment within a certain price range. And by late February, I had found the one that I wanted. And so I would say it took about 30 days. And I looked at six or seven different apartments, which is not that many. I've known that some people really are particular about certain features. And so mine had to just have um, certain features that I was non-negotiable about. So what I went in. I went in with a short list of understanding what I was looking for, and then from there was able to look at specific apartments that fit those needs. So for the beginning of the process to of the getting a mortgage to receiving the approval of the mortgage, sorry. Particularly my situation was a nightmare. And I think it had something to do with the lender that I went with, and also with the fact that we were under COVID pandemic effects on the the market. So I received a pre-approval for my mortgage in early February, and in co-op apartments, there's an extra step that once you get a pre-approved and you get an acceptance of an offer and then you under contract, you have to start submitting all your documents to the bank. And then there's a board approval um, process. So the difference between a co-op and the difference between a co-op in a condo or a co-op in a home is that the co-op is run like a company, and there's a board that makes decisions on who can participate and become a shareholder. So essentially, you're applying to be a shareholder of a company, and that company is the building. And in the building, you own your apartment as forms of shares. And so once you go through the pre-approval, you get to a certain point, you then wait for your approval of the board and then continue the process. Now here's the issue. When I submitted my documents, I fully had a fully executed contract at late February. They usually give you about 60 to 90 days to complete your contract, to execute the contract, and to get approved. Now, by I want to say May, yes, early May was when I got my board interview. I had to sit down and talk to the board. It was via Zoom because it was under COVID restrictions. And so board members interviewed me as a candidate that wanted to join the board. Why did you want to join the community? why Brady Court, which is where, they, like, what can I bring to the table, letting me know of the rules and regulations, and just seeing if I was a good fit for the community. And it was a pretty, nerve wracking process. Um, and then once I got that approval, which happened within 48 hours, I submitted that to the bank and I continued the process forward. Because I went with a big bank that did not particularly specialize in uh, co-ops uh, in New York City, it took me an absorbingly long time. Also because I went with a first-time homeowners grant that was for first-time homeowners in New York City. It's called the Sony May program, and that ended up delaying it up to 7 months. So I didn't get fully final approval until September. So in total, I was under contract for a good 7 months, which is unheard of. It is way too long. Typically, it only takes 60 to 90 days, 120 days at most. It took me a very long time. What made me choose the location? So the location is right next to the Brady Court. I mean, right next to the Bronx Zoo and the Botanical Gardens on the 2 and the 5. And I was looking for specifically three different neighborhoods. I was looking at Riverdale, Kingsbridge, and my old neighborhood, which is Bronx Park East. Now, I moved into Bronx Park East back in 2009 and had lived there for 6.5 years, actually when I started working at Innovation. And then after 2014, I moved from that location back into Manhattan just to kind of change it up a little bit. But that's the spot that I lived the longest. And so when I was looking for an apartment, I thought to myself, well, let me go back to my old neighborhood, my old stopping ground, and see what's available. And oh, look, the building that I used to live in and used to rent from, there's some space, some locations available, some apartments, and the apartments itself are distributed in such a way that fit my needs. It just so happened that the person who was selling was an old friend of mine that I didn't know was selling at the time. It was an old acquaintance who lived in the neighborhood, and so it kind of felt very kismet on that end. Did I offer the lower or exact or higher price? So I did offer $10,000 below asking price, and I negotiated to say, listen, you're not going to get this. He had evaluated at his apartment at a higher price than what the comparables were. And so, me knowing what the comparables were in the area really lend myself to offer $10,000 less and secure because I did have a high credit rating. I had offered a 20% down when only the requirements was 15%, and had already brought a pre-approval to the um, to the location. I'm going to stop in just a second because there's a transition. Be right back. All right, I'm back. So that was the process. What was the process for getting your offer accepted? So the first step was viewing the location. Okay, I had to make sure there was location. I went in with my real estate agent. We looked at it. We decided that it was a good fit. We then prepared. We had the pre-approval to show that we were a strong candidate. So that pre-approval did take me actually reaching out to the bank and saying, hey, I'm interested in opening up a mortgage. And so I entered in all the calculations and they give you a certain amount that you're pre-approved for and saying you actually are pre-approved up to this amount. Now my amount was like, upwards of like 450, 500,000, knowing full well that if I calculated my mortgage payments a month, I wasn't going to be able to actually pay that a month. So although I was able to get it pre-approved for a certain amount, I knew that that wasn't the max that I wanted to hit. I wasn't going to be like, oh, I will, pre-approve for 450 to 500,000. I'm gonna go ahead and find a $500,000 home, because then when you break down the mortgage payments plus the maintenance, my monthly payment was going to be too far from where I wanted to be. After viewing the location and settling, this is what we want, this is the offer, I then start to draft up a contract, right? And start talking about the negotiation and price, negotiation the terms of the contract, right? Saying this is what we're going to offer, this is what we need, and we needed to then go through the appraisal process and the inspection. The appraisal process is saying that is ensuring that the price that you're paying for is the value of the home. And so what they do is they look at, like, the comparables in the area, again, like the certain amount of square footage, and the different locations in the area, how much the area is worth, what are the how much are the other apartments in contract, and that ends up making sure that what you're paying for is not so far out of the range of what it's worth. And if there is a difference, then you're going to have to make up that difference. Okay. Um, After that, you get in the inspection. This is to ensure that everything is running smooth, like everything in the house is smooth, everything in the house is working properly. There's no cracks, foundations, and all that good stuff. After that passes inspection, after it passes the appraisal process, then you have a fully executed contract, right? And then you start it's under the condition that you are going to get financial backing by a mortgage lending company, and that the bank is going to approve your um, your your loan. So once both sides of the contract are fully executed, that begins the next process. And so that part was the part that ended up taking forever, because I did go with the big bank. I went with Citibank, and it was such a mess in terms of how they were putting back in the queue. They would ask for documents that already asked, like, everything. You literally have to go through and hand over bank statements, credit histories, rental history, all that. Just gives that, you hand it over to them, and then they have to underwrite it, and then they have to, after the underwriters like approve it, then the processor, then you come to the table, and you then have to then sign over your life, basically. At the table, you have your attorneys, the seller's attorney, you have the title lien person that is transferring over the deeds and whatnot. So there's a bunch of paper swirling around, signing over everything, making sure that you got everything is done legally and faithfully. One thing I do want to say is that what's important was the mortgage rates. Okay, because ensuring a low mortgage rate and getting the best mortgage rate was crucial in terms of determining what company I was going to go with. I did get a very low mortgage rate, and I also got some incentives. I did end up getting about $11,000 as a grant for the particular neighborhood I was moving into, and because I was going with Citibank, which ended up costing me a lot more in time. Was I worried about any biases against me? Absolutely. This one where it leads back to that drag in time. Because I was using a state program that I didn't necessarily have to use, but because I used it, I felt that there was some kind of biases that was taking a lot longer because it was using federal funding and state funding. And so the lag in time, I was worried that because I am Latino, because I'm a person of color, because I was moving into the Bronx, because all these things, that there was a purposeful lag in the process. I hadn't heard, I had people who had searched for an apartment in July, and by September they were moved in, and I was still waiting. And so I started really getting aggravated and sending some very, very strongly worded emails. And only when I got everyone's, managers and senior, liaisons actually involved, did the process end up moving forward. And so it was a little bit biased because of it being my first time. However, now having gone through the process, I'm a great resource for other people to understand how to get an apartment. So hopefully that helps. I know I talked a lot, but yeah.